Good day everyone, so you all know that I love my girl Kokomi, and for me it's one of the most fun things ever to explain how the character works from a combat perspective, but also to stand up for the character and show people how they don't really understand what Kokomi is all about, and that is precisely what today's video is about. I really want to dive a bit deeper into Kokomi's personality and highlight some of the things that are pointed out to us as players in game that some of the people kind of miss when they judge a character like Kokomi. So this is going to be a bit of a longer video, but hopefully it will be interesting to all of you. So what brought this about? Well, currently we have the 3.8 event ongoing, and obviously the event is all about Klee in Disneyland. And with the entire event, we've got a cast of characters: Eula, Klee, Kole, and of course Kokomi. So this is the thing that some of the people point out here in the post. Is Kokomi really a genius character? Has she demonstrated or said stuff that actually points to her being a smart character, or that can demonstrate her capability to us as the reader? You can see here right at the bottom they say, you know, the game just too much telling and not enough showing. So what does this actually mean for Kokomi? Is she really such a bad character? Now, I'm not really going to respond to this top post here because there is actually someone right here at the bottom that did a bit of an analysis, if you will, on Kokomi specifically, and they got certain things wrong. So let's go through their analysis and then see exactly what they didn't get. So I'm going to start reading this out loud. So this is just for the benefit of those of you that tune in without actually watching what's happening on screen. Right, so let me read what Golden Owl says here. This is what he says, and I quote, "Generally, a character is only as clever as their author. In Kokomi's case, the authors pretty much had no idea what to remotely do with her by virtue of being placed in a nigh impossible narrative scenario. No matter what she do, there is no reality in which Kokomi can ever win the war she has instigated, which reflects abysmally on her supposed intellect. They wanted her to be a mastermind underdog tactician leading an army against an invincible god, but they truly sold the shogun as invincible, meaning there is really absolutely nothing that Kokomi can do by virtue of being an outsider. Even if the Watatsumi overcame Sarah's army, there's nothing that they can do against the shogun herself to change her mind. This results in the resistance having zero endgame plan on overthrowing the shogun, which means that Kokomi is effectively waging a war that will end in her people's deaths. We even see the result of this since the resistance is barely struggling to keep up with Sarah. So you pretty much end up with a leader leading a resistance without any real cause, since they themselves have little reason to care about the Vision Hunt decree." And I'm going to end the quote there. Obviously, this post goes on and so forth, but there are a couple of things that I feel is completely missing in this post. So let's go in-game to Kokomi's character story. This is what the game actually tells us. So this is the canon lore with Kokomi. So the first thing that I think we need to pay attention to is what's written here in Kokomi's character story 1. So on the day that she became the divine priestess in Watatsumi Island, a lot of people were suspicious. There was quite a lot of surprise, confusion, chuckle. So clearly people were even gossiping about the character because they all thought that, you know, she's too young. She really can't assume this role. It's even written here in her character story 1 that plots were hatched and questions were endless. The ambitious planned to make their move. So very clearly there was a faction inside Watatsumi Island that decided, well, you know, since she's now taking the role, we can take advantage of this and actually overthrow the Sangonomiya clan in taking control of Watatsumi Island. So this is really, really interesting. So from that perspective, we can see that Kokomi really had her work cut out for her. And as it's pointed out here, once Kokomi ascended to her position and started getting to work, she was quite good at managing Watatsumi Island. She was fair in distributing punishment, rewards, and people eventually understood that yes, she is a capable manager of the island. And that is why people said, as it says here, and I quote, "Things will be all right as long as Her Excellency is here." So from the perspective of her capabilities as a character, there should really be no doubt. Kokomi manages her own island. She has the capability. Just like Yaemiko for 500 years has managed the shrine, just like Ayato is the commissioner of the Yashiro Commission. So we know that these characters, these really smart or genius characters, as the Reddit post calls them, they aren't just there for the sake of being there. There is actual substance if you go through their character stories as to why they can deservingly be called like smart or genius characters. So from my perspective, I have no reason to doubt Kokomi's abilities. And when it comes to the war, it's very interesting in and of itself that Kokomi was not necessarily the one that instigated it. So if you read here on her vision story, it says that a leader with a strong will can lead those around them in a clear direction. However, Kokomi lacks such strong ideals. Instead, she respects the will of the people and wishes that they can each find their own way. When the Vision Hunt decree came about, the resentment of the people turned into cries of revolt, and so Kokomi led them in raising the banner of resistance. So this is exactly what the problem is. Kokomi herself is a good manager. It even says here once the war was over, Kokomi turned towards governance and economics. That is where her capability really lies and where she shines. But as a leader, you can clearly see that what she is trying to do is manage everyone's expectations. She's trying to balance all of these things out. So now the Vision Hunt decree comes out. You have that the entire Inazuma is cut off from the rest of the world. This has economic implications for the people of Watatsumi Island. And now you have the shogunate coming and knocking on the door saying, oh, all of you that are vision holders, we want your visions. So clearly this puts Watatsumi Island and its residents in a terrible predicament. And not only that, there is bad history between the residents of Watatsumi Island and the shogunate, precisely because the shogun slayed their god a few hundred years back. So from this perspective, Kokomi in a certain sense did not actively push for the war, but what she did is she decided to instigate this war as part of a balancing act on behalf of respecting her people's ideals. Those very people that probably have a good reason to go to war because their livelihoods were shut out. They're told that they cannot use their visions anymore. This is kind of really, really serious. So from the perspective that Kokomi had no reason to make a war, I can't really see that that criticism, as pointed out in the Reddit post, is actually valid. And it's also very clear that it's not Kokomi herself that actively wanted to start a war with the hopes that she will not win. I'm pretty sure that Kokomi herself knows that something must have been wrong, and that the best thing that she could do at that point in time was to manage her expectations and hopefully try and resolve this in some sort of way. Now, this is the part where I actually do agree with the Reddit post. Even if Kokomi and her team put up a resistance, which they probably had to do by necessity, there was no real endgame plan, and I think this is where Hoyo did fail in terms of the Inazuma arc. What Hoyo should have done is they should have gotten Kokomi and the Traveler to meet, and then by virtue of that, uncover what the Fatui were doing, relay that information to Yaemiko and Ayato, and then ultimately have a secret meeting between Ayato, Kokomi, and Yaemiko, and then all of them together will go to the Shogun. They'll confront Signora, all of them together, presenting the evidence. You have a showdown, Signora gets slain, and then we then have to engage with Shogun and talk her out of it. That to me would have been a very good way of writing out Inazuma. You've got all the plot details being there, but some of the motivations and the way in which Hoyo handled the overall story was just not good enough. But to really stretch it out and say that Kokomi was kind of failing, that she had the wrong reasons, I don't think that is necessarily the case. I think Kokomi herself was aware of the situation, but of course, like anyone in this sort of scenario, she did not have perfect information to make the best best of a situation. The war really was deteriorating. And to me personally, this is where I think the Hoyo writers did fail a bit. What they should have done to keep everything consistent with Kokomi's story, character stories and so on, was to have that her soldiers in her army take up a deal without her approval with the Fatui, and then this could have made for such an interesting story where her people don't trust her because things aren't going as well, but obviously because they went outside of her directives, there was a serious consequence to life. So this would, in my opinion, have been a far better way to write in the Fatui subplot. So yes, I do agree that Hoyo did not do that well, and it is something that you could perhaps argue that it was kind of putting Kokomi was in a bit of a catch-22 situation. So would you really blame her for that when her own people also actively brought this deal to her? So it's not like she actively sought out the help. It was like that this help came in, and then her people were very responsive to this help because they now feel, oh, we wanted this war, things are going good, and you guys know how the rest of the story plays out. But yeah, so from my perspective, there is quite a lot that is problematic. But I think to really start wrapping all of this up, there is a final little detail in Kokomi's character that a lot of people also seem to ignore, and this could play as part of a bit of hidden motivation for why she does the thing she does, and that is right here in the beginning where they talk about the god Urabashi. So basically, he was slain, but he had this desire to protect Watatsumi Island, and this will to protect Watatsumi Island lives on in the bloodline of the Sangonomiya clan from generation to generation. And the meaning behind this is as such, and I'm quoting here, to inherit the will of a god in a mortal's body and to defend this land and its people in that god's stead. So from a certain perspective, you could argue that whilst Kokomi, as Kokomi the character, has a strategic mind and thinking and so on, a part of her actions may be influenced by this, I don't really want to call it external factor, but by her bloodline. She is compelled to protect Watatsumi Island. So when there is a threat, she has to respond to it. It's very much like Nehida almost self-sacrificing her for Sumru. We saw this with the Apep the dragon and the whole the Tore arc where she wanted to protect the people of Sumru. And I'm also getting a very similar feeling here where the entire will of a god lives inside Kokomi. It's in her blood. And this in and of itself can also provide powerful enough reason as to why she ultimately caved in or gave into the will of her people and started the war. I think, to be honest, this is probably the primary reason why this war was started, more so than Kokomi, being someone that likes military books and tacticians and so on. I think those things are incidental to what is fundamentally in her blood and could have been the driving factor. So just to summarize all of this, I don't think Kokomi herself, if she were really without the influence of Urabashi and the, I don't know how do you pronounce it, Urabashi, whatever. Without the influence of him and the people really putting pressure on her, I really doubt that she would have really gone to the lengths of having a war. If she probably had met Yaemiko, there would have been a diplomatic solution that they could have found, but I think the big confounding factor here was precisely how the Fatui came in and messed up quite a lot of different things, and this is exactly what the Shogun herself should have actually taken responsibility for. I would have loved the Shogun to go to Watatsumi Island to speak to Kokomi and to say, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding and for putting your people in this situation. That in and of itself would have been quite a better resolution than the one we've had in game. So I'm not defending what the writers did in Inazuma. There's quite a lot that lacks, but I do feel that with the threads and the plot lines that we were given, had it been executed in a different way and we have been given slightly different character motivations, it could have really been an interesting story that would have been told. But from my perspective, the big message here is Kokomi quite deservedly, I think, well, let me put another way. Kokomi deserves to be seen as a strategic or tactical genius. We just need to note that this is not the only thing to a character, and I do agree with the sentiment that Hoyo pushing this narrative that, oh my god, look at this smart Kokomi, is probably not the right way to handle her character in some of these events. But in any case, that is what I have to say. Feel free to agree or disagree down below in the comment section. I know this is a bit of a long video, but I think that is just what I wanted to point out. Thanks for watching.